Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to the in-person, live, and live Zoom worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Riverside. As you can tell, we're having some tech problems here, but it's allowed time for a few other people to wander in, those brave souls who managed to find parking space somewhere. Our opening hymn this morning is number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth, from the Gray Hymnal, or you can also read the words off of the wall here. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please only with a mask on. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing For the Beauty of this Earth. Thank you for joining us here in person and those by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for the virtual attendees. I'm Bonnie McFarland, a member of the Worship Association, Worship Committee and of this church, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the Worship Committee you will hear from include Alec Peck singing our songs, and Grace Preuss, who will be delivering the sermon. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. We come together this morning to remind one another that we are connected in mystery and miracle, awareness and gratitude. We have come to this time and place to explore different spiritual perspectives together, develop a faith that is personally meaningful, and to bring our gifts of love and service to this community and to each other. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. Although our doors are open, the pandemic is not over. So while we are in the sanctuary, please keep your masks on while singing, and let's all take personal responsibility to keep one another safe. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to make. I will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we'll leave up a slide with this information, and it's also available on the website. Okay. Our dinner series continues on February 18th my sister's birthday, at 5 p.m. in the parish hall with pasta dishes. Tickets will be sold only in advance and reservations are required. Prices are $25 for adults, $12 for 12 for children, ages 6 to 12, and children 5 and under are free. Tickets can be purchased from PayPal or from our treasurer, Kate, or Robert in the office. Please pick up flyers in the parish hall. And now I invite you to sit back and take a slow, deep breath as we move into this worship hour. You're welcome to read with me the mission statement of our church. Our mission is to, we don't have, okay. Our mission is to foster a diverse religious community that celebrates life, affirms the individual, encourages spiritual growth and open thought, and works to advance social justice and environmental sustainability. Today's sermon was written originally by Waldemar Argow Jr. The Reverend Argow was born in Ohio in 1916. He moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 1921, moved east in 1930, and returned to Cedar Rapids as a Unitarian minister in 1944. He was educated at Antioch and Harvard, and prior to entering the ministry, he was a reporter on the Detroit Times and on the research staff of Reader's Digest. So he's done a lot of things. In 1941, Argow was ordained as a minister in Amherst, Massachusetts. He served in both Unitarian and Universalist congregations in Massachusetts and Philadelphia, but his longest tenures were in Cedar Rapids and Toledo, Ohio. In addition to that, I was dating a fellow in Washington, D.C. back in the early 70s. And some of you may have heard me reference once in a while, a Unitarian minister back then, who used to speak at the Unitarian church that we would go to. And he was the most amazing dynamic speaker. He, this is 1970 and 71, okay? His sermons they'd hit the newspapers sometimes in Washington, D.C. He was amazing. That's who you're going to hear the words of today. I always wondered what happened to him. I never knew, how long he was there. He was the first African-American minister to a large Unitarian church in this country. Okay. Charles Darwin is primarily known as the architect of the theory of evolution by natural selection. With the publication of On the Origin of Species in 1859, he advanced a view of the development of life on Earth that profoundly shaped nearly all biological and much philosophical thought which followed. Charles Darwin is centrally important in the development of scientific and humanist ideas because he first made people aware of their place in the evolutionary process. Now we have two lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied Indigenous peoples remembrance candle, and the second is the lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon the traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original people of this land who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first the sacred space of several groups of indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupeño, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of this sacred and holy place. We are blessed with a space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of the world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. For our chalice, today's reading is Hymn to the Light by David Breeden. Our light is the light of the sun, keeper of all we love. Our light is the light of the earth, provider of sustenance. Our light is the light of all living things, life precious like our own. Our light is the light of each of us, bound together in need and hope. Our light is the light of the cosmos, keeper of all we know. We have a tradition here at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. We know it can be uncomfortable to stand up and speak in front of others, so I'm going to ask for a volunteer from someone who's been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you in a minute, we have an eager volunteer here. In a minute, let me finish. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer from someone who's been here a while to tell us your name, how you found out about this church. We ask you to step up close to the mic and speak directly into it so clearly and so everyone can hear. However, be aware that you will be visible on Zoom and in the recording of the service, which is posted online. Nick?
I'm Nick Williams, and I am a Universalist Unitarian. Came to this church, it was a dark and stormy night. Just had a brief repast and was walking this way with my friend Charles Darwin when we came upon this small sandstone church. Lo and behold, there was a concert going on inside. Saying we have nothing better to do, we advanced in, made a donation, and sat and watched the storyteller, songwriter, joke teller kind of guy, kind of Garrison Keillor style. Very amusing. I thought it's a nice place. It's got, quality to it. It's been around a while. I thought we would escape the church and be nothing more done with it. However, a close friend that came with me, a friend, okay. So she picks up a pamphlet with times and dates and things on it, but the title of it, you have to remember this was like maybe in the 90s, and it says, the UU view of a feminist. And I'm like, oh my God, now we're in for it. So she reads this pamphlet. She's intrigued. She wants to know more. She comes back. I wait because I know she'll get tired of it soon. We'll be back to our regular Sundays, no getting up early, no sweating in the summer, no freezing in the winter. But no, she stays. And she drags me in here with her. And now we've been here for like some 20 years. Once you come in, there's no escape. And that's how I came to be here now, speaking freely in front of you. Don't tell my wife.
Thank you, Nick. That's how it's done. If you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand and then come up to the mic in front of the pulpit.
Where should I face?
That's good.
My name's Richard Oler, and
Can you step a little closer?
my name's Richard Oler, and my dad was in the Air Force, and I started school in what was now Sunnymead, and now in Merino and Edgemont, and now it's the city of Merino Valley. I went to kindergarten and first grade, then I got stationed in other places, and I returned and went through high school and got my degree at UCR in chemistry. And I lived in Merino Valley for quite a few years after I got out of prison, and attended Oasis there in Alessandro. And I've been hanging around on the streets of Riverside for a while. I went over to the Congregational Church, in which my parents were married in West Ridgefield, Ohio in 1953. And because my mom said, if anybody ever asked me to say I belong to the Congregational Church, but they haven't been able to help me get off the streets. So I'm attending this church, and I hope they can find a place for me to stay, because I'm going to be off these streets tonight, because the city hasn't been able to help me out. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? Nope. Anybody online? Adam? Nobody. Okay. For any other new guests who, and those who have introduced themselves and those who haven't, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, this next room. And there you'll be able to find our visitors book. If you want to know what's going on in the church and would love to know that you were here, please put in your name and contact information legibly, because we can't contact you if we can't read it. So for those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. Our hymn now is number 123, Spirit of Life, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but only with a mask on. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing number 123.
Of compassion,
support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown. You may contribute by PayPal or use the QR code, which is shown on the screen, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. You want to be on the newsletter? Give us your contact information. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Dinah Rowe to purchase the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity, and to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for their generous care and attention. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? Our next hymn is number 402 from You I Receive. Feel free to sing it as the Spirit moves you, but please only with a mask on. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing from You I Receive. Our meditation today is by the Reverend David H. Eaton. This meditation is A Common Destiny. Please join me in reading the bold italicized lines. All living substance, all substance of energy, being, and purpose are united and share in the same destiny. All people, those we love and those we know not of, and share the same destiny. Birth to death, we share this unity with the sun, earth, our brothers and sisters, strangers, flowers of the field, snowflakes, volcanoes and moonbeams. Birth, life, death, unknown, known, unknown. Our destiny from unknown to unknown. May we have faith to accept this mystery and build upon its everlasting truth. Let us pause for a moment of silence and reflection. Now I would like to introduce Grace Price reading for us Argow on Darwin.
Thank you, Bonnie. So I was prepared to read this sermon on my laptop, considerably bigger screen. However, my laptop is not cooperating. So I'm going to be reading off of this screen. Please bear with me. This sermon is rather long, so I'm going to read up to the half mark, and then we'll take like a minute of intermission, and then I'll come back and speak. Okay. Our Debt to Charles Darwin. A sermon by Reverend W. Waldemar, W. Argow, PhD. When one thinks about Charles Darwin and his contributions to our common life, it is inevitable that the words of Victor Hugo should come to mind. Said he, "The most irresistible power in all the world is an idea whose hour has struck." This is the centennial year of Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species Through the Method of Natural Selection. As I contemplated the coming of the centennial, I have felt for some time that I wanted to speak about Darwin's contribution, made through this book, to the understanding of our common life and ourselves. Also, by this small token of gratitude, I shall pay tribute to Charles Darwin for what, through The Origin of Species and his other great book, The Descent of Men, he meant to me personally in those Babylonian years when I was struggling for a rational, reasonable, and sensible interpretation of this life of ours. It is therefore out of a sense of profound gratitude that I speak this morning. So stupendous was the effect of Darwin's writings that it shattered man's intellectual world, scattering pieces into every nook and cranny of civilization. So revolutionary was it, and so overwhelmingly that it produces an entirely different intellectual, moral, social, and spiritual climate in which men from there on were bound to live. It is my opinion that Charles Darwin ranks among the four great men in our Western culture. The first was Copernicus, who added vast new areas to our lives. The second was Sir Isaac Newton, who gave us an altogether new understanding and concept of this universe of which we are all a part. And lastly, there was Sigmund Freud, who likewise gave us a revolutionary new understanding, not only of ourselves, but also of our identity with our human past. And so it is, as we contemplate Charles Darwin and his revolutionary contributions this morning, that I want to place him in his proper niche in man's unfolding story. Perhaps it might be well for just a moment to try to understand who he was and how he came to make his historic contributions. First of all, he was born on the very same day as Abraham Lincoln, February 12, 1809, in the little village of Shrewsbury, England. His father, Dr. Robert Darwin, and his grandfather, Dr. Erasmus Darwin, were men of profound intellectual power. Both of them were physicians. Early in life, young Charles showed a propensity for inquiry into the mysteries of life all about him. Everything fascinated him. By the age of 10, he had already amassed a collection of many hundreds of different insects and flowers. Not only had he collected them, but he had also classified them, and he knew wherein they varied from one another. Understandably, it was the father's wish that Charles should follow in the family profession of physicians. But the boy was too much interested in the mystery of life all about him. As a consequence, when Charles was in his late teens, his father sent him to Cambridge in the hope that the influence of the intellectual climate there might change his viewpoint. But fortunately, as things turned out, the boy fell under the influence of some outstanding naturalists. When I use the word naturalist this morning, you must bear in mind that there were only two types of intellectual discipline in Darwin's time. One was the so-called classical, and the other was the so-called natural. There was no such thing as science in our modern sense of the term. And anyone who was a philosopher might conceivably also be a naturalist if he were interested in the natural phenomena about him. While he was there at Cambridge, young Darwin's soul was electrified by the consideration and interest shown him. His father had hoped that if he did not go into medicine, Charles might become a clergyman. This was not in the cards for Charles, however, for the study of theology interests him not at all. I often reflect upon the fact that if you fail to make good at everything else, or if you are not interested in anything else, people will want to make a preacher out of you. The story is told of the father who, as was the custom in an earlier generation, selected and elected the professions and vocations of his sons. Said he to his wife, "My dear, this oldest boy of ours has a very fine and analytical mind. I'm sure we can make a lawyer out of him. Our second son has a sympathetic feeling for people. We're convinced we can make a doctor out of him. But our youngest son, well, he's something of a dullard, as you know. So it must be that he will be our preacher." Too often this has been the case. And usually the implication has been that if you can't succeed at anything else, at least you can putter around in the ministry. By the end of his Cambridge career, Charles had become more interested than ever in the vast array of facts and bits of information about the natural world that were beginning to pile up everywhere. So in separation, he went to his uncle, Josiah Wedgwood, to ask him to intercede with his father. Now, it just so happened that at this particular time, the British Crown announced that the Royal Navy was to send a ship around the world for the study of natural phenomena and to gather all the information it could for the benefit of the Navy. Charles was overwhelmed with joy at the possibility that he might be appointed official naturalist for the voyage. Finally, his father consented, and on December 22nd, 1836, HMS Beagle set sail on her historic 5-year-long voyage. Perhaps no other voyage, with the exception of Columbus's first one, has accomplished as much for civilization as the long, long cruise of Her Majesty's ship, Beagle. Month after month, Beagle slowly circled the Earth, avoiding the North and South poles, of course, but sailing into almost every other area of the Earth's surface. Every time the ship dropped anchor, Charles would go ashore to the mainland or to some island, and driven by his insatiable curiosity, would collect seeds, flowers, rocks, bits of stone, fossils, insects and animals that he might bring them back to the shop. Then, during the night or when the vessel was underway again, he would study and analyze and correlate until at last a tremendous amount of facts and information began to take shape, which gave him an insight into many new things and many mysterious things. Darwin himself did not quite know what he was looking for, but somehow he felt that he was in the midst of a great mystery that was gradually unraveling. During this time, he acquainted himself as much as possible with breedings of plants, animals, fowl, cattle, and horses, so that he might learn how breeds and new species came into being. After 5 eventful years, he returned to his home base. An omnivorous reader, Darwin became acquainted with the work of Jean Lamarck, the French naturalist, Carolus Linnaeus, the Swedish naturalist, and Sir James Hooker, the English geologist. Ideas were everywhere in the air. An intellectual hunger was manifesting itself, and Charles was constantly seeking for answers. Now then, what was the marvelous thing that was happening, and why did it come about? In the first place, what Charles Darwin did with his discoveries and his correlation of facts was nothing less than to shatter man's existing concept of creation. Up until Darwin's time, it had been universally believed and universally taught that on the day of creation, which had occurred only 6,000 years previously, God had created every blade of grass, every plant, every tree, every insect, every fish, every bird, every animal, every living organism exactly as it was. There had been absolutely no change whatsoever. People believed in what was known as the immutability of the species. That is to say, everything that exists today is merely a continuation, a reproduction of something that God originally created. There had been no variation, no change. When fossils were found, particularly the fossilized remains of the great prehistorical animals, men did not believe that these ancient creatures were no longer living. Instead, they maintained that the animals must still be alive, and the skeletons' remains were those of contemporary creatures, even though no one had ever seen them. The world was still a big place with unexplored hinterlands in many directions, and men believed that if only they ventured far enough into the undiscovered regions, they would find these fabulous creatures still alive. The basic concept, you see, was that there had been no change whatsoever in any way in any existing living thing. The first thing Darwin did was to build a stairway down into the past. And instead of being 6,000 years long, the path of the stairs was proving to be millions of years long. Down, 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 it went into the past that was utterly different from anything man had dreamed of before. This was the way in which Darwin built up his conception of the past. In all of his studies, during all of his voyages, he had seen the rise of volcanoes and the disappearance of land masses. He had seen sedimentary rocks, and in those rocks, he had seen the skeletons and fossilized remains of animals which no longer existed upon this earth. He looked and found that there was total dissimilarity with everything that lived today. Another thing that was startling was the fact that a species of plant or animal which he found in one place was very different from the same species he found in another place. He first discovered this phenomena in the Cape Verde Islands, where he found that the birds, the flora, and even the animals on the Cape Verde group were completely different from those in the Galapagos group. Also, he found that the mice on the east side of the Andes were significantly different from those on the west side. All these discrepancies caused Darwin to ask questions. During the Beagle's long voyage, he kept a detailed account of everything he saw and found. In his notebooks, he made voluminous notes indicating exactly what he had found in this insect, that fossil, this plant. He noted the soil, the moisture content, sun, winds, rocks, and the chemistry of anything that could give him any clue. And still, he had no answer as to why this was different from that. But now he was convinced that there was a power at work somewhere in the nature of things, an orderly power that apparently worked according to some definite law, which as yet he was unable to put his finger on. In addition, he became an astute and careful student of anatomy, not only human, but anatomy of all skeletal substance. By a process of comparison, he discovered that the hand of a man, the paw of a mole, the flipper of a seal, the wing of a bird, and the hoof of a horse were similar in function and must have a common origin. All this anatomical similarity began to persuade him back, down the long corridors of time. Life had suffered certain changes in form, and that one fragment of life must have grown out of another fragment of life. As yet, there was no real science, certainly not of genetics, and very little of biology. And all that he had to be done by the long, tortuous method of induction. Okay, that's the half point. I'm gonna take a minute. Everyone do a mental stretch. It's a lot to process. All right, we're ready? Ready to go back in? All right, here we go. One day he came upon Thomas Malthus's famous book on the problem of human population. In this book, Malthus had written that population, be it of plants or animals or insects or men, increases or decreases according to environmental factors, such as food supplies or enemies. As a consequence, Malthus contended that the force behind these various population problems was basically the same. It was a struggle for existence. When the struggle for existence is intense and powerful, the weak are pushed aside and the strong survive. At long last, Darwin had found the clue he was looking for. What happens, he maintained, is that the fit mate with the fit and the unfit with the unfit, and sometimes either way. But in the end, it is the fit who are able to survive in the struggle for existence. So here finally was his answer to the mysterious something he had sensed at work in life. And he defined it by calling it the survival of the fit by the process of natural selection. Now, just at this point, there occurred one of the most remarkable episodes of which I know so far as humility and deference of mind to another were concerned. Way over on the other side of the world in Australia lived a naturalist by the name of Alfred Russel Wallace, who independently had been doing a lot of research similar to Darwin's. The two men had corresponded, but only in a vague and desultory way. Darwin's friends had been trying to persuade him to publish his conclusions. Said they, "You should now gather all the information you have, put it in a book, and give it to the world." Darwin was about to do this when one day he opened a letter from his friend Wallace, in which considerable length Wallace presented a theory which was almost identical with Darwin's theory. Darwin gasped in amazement. To think that another human being, without any interchange of ideas or information, could come to the same conclusion. And yet, instead of being angry, instead of brushing aside Wallace's letter and trying to ignore it, Darwin went to his friends and said, "I'm not entitled to publish my book, because if it really is Alfred Russel Wallace who has made this great discovery, and he is entitled to the credit." Wallace, it turned out, was a man of equally fine character. After some further correspondence, he urged Darwin to go ahead and publish, which Darwin did. When the book was published, a veritable earthquake took place in the intellectual life of England. The abuse that was heaped upon Darwin's head was almost beyond belief. He was called a God smasher, a man whose insane desire was to disrobe and dethrone God. Leader of the attack upon Darwin was Bishop Wilberforce of the Established Church of England. Speaking out on behalf of Darwin was, as you might guess, a Unitarian clergyman, Dr. Charles Kingsley. Said he, "Let God smite men dumb, but not with ignorance, but with understanding. If this is denied, let the truth be told." Sounds very Unitarian. Darwin's staunchest defender at this time was the great Thomas Huxley, whose grandsons are known today by their writings. Huxley published a long approving article on the book in the London Times, and when Thomas Huxley put his stamp of approval on what Darwin had discovered, or at least on his theories, the climate of opinion began to change, and it became respectable now, at least to inquire into Darwin's concept. What was that historical concept? What contribution has Charles Darwin made to our understanding of ourselves? It is almost impossible to give it to you in any categorical fashion, for you need to disabuse and empty your minds of such concepts as we have today, and try to think yourselves back 100 years to the time when Darwin's book was published. In essence, here is what he gave us. First of all, this is a living and growing universe. Such a position is commonplace today, of course, but you remember that Darwin pioneered it. Ours, said he, is a living universe in which all life has a common origin. Furthermore, it is an infinite universe in which life, not biological life exactly, but life substance in its mysteriousness is triumphant and universal. Still further, said he, by the change from the simple to the complex, all human beings share in the common life stream, and we are all related part and parcel to all other living things and pulsating things. And finally, it means that all life carries within itself the best qualities of its own past. It remained for Sigmund Freud to make us aware of how immediate the past is in every one of us, that the past is not dead and that we belong to a great, unbroken human stream, and that therefore we carry a kind of immortality within us. Take, for example, your own personal case. You are the child of 2 people, and these 2 people are the children of 4 people, and then 16, and then 32, and so on, and so on, and so on. And after you get through the human stream, you go to the pre-human stream. And after that, you go on back and back and back with an ever unbroken line. There has never been a moment in that long, mysterious record of billions of years in which there was one single break between you and the origin of life. If there had been such a break, you wouldn't be here. All of this means that we carry within ourselves an immortality that goes back to the very heart of things. That's deep. Still, another thing Darwin gave us is this. In the evolution of man, with the emergence of reason and intellectual instinct, then reason, and then the spiritual qualities of love, it is as if the Creator had said, now I am finished with the evolution of man. I am turning the process over and placing it in your hands. With instinct, reason, and love, you now have the power either to destroy yourselves and all other life too, or you can go forth and create a world more closer to the heart's desire. The last thing to come out of Darwin's revolution is some realization of the supreme dignity, majesty, and awful responsibility of man. Do you suppose we could get this concept across to people? This feeling of identity? This sense of intimacy with the greater cosmic stream of life? If only we could get this across to people, particularly our political, military, and other leaders, would any of them still tinker or flirt with the possibility of destroying life upon this earth with the atomic or hydrogen bomb? What tremendous moral responsibility rests upon us of this generation. For all we have it in our power to destroy all life from the face of the earth, every last vestige of living protoplasm until only a burnt out cinder is left. Now, I am willing to grant that perhaps we have a right to destroy ourselves. Maybe our own little lives do belong to us to do with what we will. But do we have the right, the moral right, to destroy all other living substance which shares the common quality of livingness within us? Certainly it is a madness that has possessed us, something only an insane man would tolerate, much less conceive. What does all of this mean for us today in our generation? Assuredly, it means this, that traditional religion must face up to the facts of evolution as Charles Darwin gave them to us. That all life is one, that we have all sprung from the great universal heart of life, and that we all have a moral responsibility to one another and to life in general. I say, unless traditional religion accepts these foundation facts in place of its childlike image of a magical creation in a mythical Garden of Eden, it is morally derelict to its great responsibility, and it needs desperately to be awakened to the facts of life. In the year 1882, there came one day, a lovely spring morning, when the earth was being recarpeted with its perennial green velvet. Blossoms were bursting forth out of our darksome earth, and birds were relearning their almost forgotten throaty songs. And on this day, April 17th, the magnificent heart and mind of Charles Darwin returned to the great world soul, which he had learned to revere and so splendidly honor. In a few days, Darwin's body was carried from the manor house where he had lived, taken to Westminster Abbey, and there placed along the remains of another great man who had also added much to the realm of human knowledge, Sir Isaac Newton. How true of Charles Darwin are the words of James Russell Lowell when he said, "Great truths are portions of the souls of men. Great souls are portions of eternity." Darwin, I thank you for what you have contributed to our understanding of the greatness, grandeur, and magnificent glory of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Before we proceed, I have a correction to make. Due to a confluence of electronic and synaptic misfires over the last 24 hours, I mixed up the ministers. So obviously, that minister that you just heard was not the one who was at the Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. That person is the one that we quoted for the mission statement. No, I mean for the words. Anyway, for the meditation. That's right. It was for the meditation. And so I want to read you a very, very brief description of him in Wikipedia. Reverend David Hillard Easton, born 1932, died in 1992, was the first African-American minister of All Souls Church, Unitarian of Washington, D.C., and an influential citizen of Washington, D.C. politics from the 1960s until his death. Under his leadership, the All Souls Church became a center of social activism with a racially balanced congregation. So, back to our service. Our closing hymn is number 1008, When Our Heart is in the Holy Place, and it's in the teal hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please only with a mask on. Please stand in body or spirit and singing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
and we share the silence of sacred space, and the crowded heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith. Then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place.
Ever-living source of us all, may we find wisdom this day. May we come to understand that we, without you, are a well without water, that a person without friends is a tree without branches, that words without deeds are a cry no one can hear, that knowing without feeling is a head without a body, that strength without tenderness is a darkness where no light shines, that life without love is a desert where no rain falls. May the wisdom we find this day make us wiser in the days ahead, wise enough to be ourselves and to try to understand ourselves as best we may, wise enough to be the master of our moods, wise enough to find in the buffeting and shocks of life a discipline that will make us stronger than we were before. May the varied experiences of each day increase our store of wisdom. May our fellowship with one another and with you increase our treasury of love. Namaste, amen, and blessed be. We want to thank you, Grace, for sharing your valuable time and the reading with us this morning. It's sincerely appreciated, and we know we will see you again. For those of you who would like to stay in the sanctuary for 5 or 10 minutes, or 10 or 15 minutes, for questions or to share some discussion or observations from the service, please remain in the sanctuary or online. Be aware these comments will be posted online. For the rest of you, you're now welcome to adjourn to the parish hall. Is there anyone who would like to share something?
This church wants to progress. They're going to have to move away from this philosophy.
You have to step up closer. We can't
If
hear.
this church wants to progress, they'll have to move away from the philosophy of humanism toward the Word of God and His Son Jesus Christ as expounded in the New King James Version of the Bible. That's the Bible I use. I'm the second coming.
Anyone else? Bill?
When we look at the Darwinism that we saw in the piece that he had here, Argow looked at it and saw the full large group of humanity and said this could be used to help the whole large group of humanity. But what we ended up with, due to the businessmen trying very hard not to be caught up in the act of advancing everyone and thus losing the profit margin, is we got social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, like a pelican and a hummingbird, are slightly different animals. The social Darwinism ended up basically saying, I'm only going to draw from a small group, survival of the fittest. If you're not doing well, you're not the fittest. And so we wound up with that, a smaller source to draw from. And I think it to be an important thing that people like Argow said, And even Darwin said you don't have to be a jerk to be involved in evolution. You can still have cooperation, you can still have love. And Argow underlined that. And also, you know, like I say, evolution as a whole includes cooperation. There was a line I remember reading recently that says, whether it's to your aesthetic or not, the Pomeranian and the timber wolf are both followed evolution. The timber wolf learned how to corner because it had quicker prey. The Pomeranian decided, the hell with this, I'm going to stick with central heating and spending a little bit of lap time. That we're all evolving, even if sometimes it doesn't look like it. And as many people as we can bring along for the party makes for a better party.
Anyone else? Anyone online? Nick?
Well, Bill, thank you for that sermon. Well, I thank Grace for covering this sermon. It was very well done, and I thought the timing was good on it. And I find that sermon to still be timely in what's going on now with us. And but it opened up a lot of thought for me, and that's what I come to church for, is to have my thoughts opened, not closed. And thank you, Bonnie, for a very well done worship assistant. Nice job. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Anyone else? Walter, you coming up to speak or leaving? Ah, one more.
I'll keep it short. I was just thinking the animals now have to, in the ocean at least, have to contend with adapting to the plastic that we throw in ever increasing amounts. So I'd be curious to see level of disgust and what Darwin would say currently. Thank you.
Anyone else? Bill, briefly?
A reminder as well that part of the reason we wind up with people who are hostile to Darwin is they felt like they were getting socked one time after another. What with, Galileo, boom, there's a good strong left jab. Darwin, that was a heck of a shot. Some of the early psychology that Freud came up with, some of the market stuff. Completely in respect for the fellow who just spoke, even though his path ain't mine. The people feel like that about evolution because they feel like they've been shown in other areas and they feel like it's not center stage. I think that evolution, especially if you use words like Unitarian, Universalist, and how many people can we bring along for the party? I think evolution is just a gentle reminder that we need to up our game a little bit, which is disappointing because I was already tired, but I'll do it.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Hope to see you again next week.